Welcome back to the Awakening Potential Show, your gateway to the extraordinary. I'm your host, Karen Rudolph, and I'm here to support you in stepping into your sassy confidence, your classy wisdom, and your bold, badassy brilliance. Because awakening your potential isn't just a moment, it's a movement. And we're here to dive into a powerful stories, soul-stirring tools, and game-changing strategies that spark transformation in your life, in your world, in the world around you. So grab a notebook, open your heart, and let's light your inner spark. Today, I'm beyond excited to introduce someone who truly embodies the journey of transformation. Our guest, Ben Mesker, he's a director. He's had over 30 years experience in the business with 5 Emmys. He's created TV shows, commercials, corporate videos on a wide range of subjects and genres.
Mm.
Hey, it's one of those mornings. But anyway, he and his wife, Donna, they own Image Garden Inc. since 2007, and it's a video and web agency. He and his wife, Donna, maintains the website, and Beg creates the imagery and the video content. So they support their clients in solving their communication challenges and enjoying the process along the way. I love that. So welcome,
Thank
welcome,
you.
welcome, welcome. And it's so good
Well,
to have you
thank
here.
you. Thank you, Karen. It's very good to be here, and I so appreciate this warm invitation to the show here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it was a pleasure when I met you and your name tag. We met not last week or a week or 2 weeks ago at a networking event, and your name tag said storyteller, and I went, oh, I love because we all have a story. For
Yeah,
me, we all have a story. And when we step into I believe when we step into our story and believe in ourselves, all of a sudden the gifts start shining. And, what's your story? I'm curious then, if you would like go back in time when
yeah,
you were a child, like what was your story back then?
yeah.
And what'd you play with? All that good stuff.
Yeah, right. Well, and story actually played a big role in my life, pretty much all along. My father was an excellent storyteller. He was actually a truck mechanic, but he would entertain the truck drivers with some really good stories. And I can remember, I have a very, very vivid memory of being a small child underneath the table there as the truck drivers and my father sat around and drank beer, and I'm under there playing with my trucks, and I'm hearing my dad recant a story, and I had heard it before, and I knew the punchline is coming, right? Like I can hear the wind up, and then boom, he hits them with the punchline, and they erupt, and I can remember as a kid, like thinking that that was pretty cool that you could like, get an effect out of people, right? And that began, I think, my love affair with storytelling, and that's a lot of what I do now, right? It's just in different ways. So, my life as a cinematographer and as a director is a creative life, which is a wonderful way to live a life. If anybody out there can find a way to make a living doing something creative, I think that's a leg up on life overall, right? Because now, your stock and trade is ideas. Your pursuits are good thoughts and creative solutions, right? Rather than maybe pursuing money. Not that that's wrong, right? I'm just saying as an alternative life, I think that
Right.
us creatives get to do something very special there, and I think that's a gift. And so what I do is, from a day-to-day basis, I'm shooting any number of kinds of things. It's different every day. So one day I may be in an operating room in a hospital shooting screens for Siemens or something like that, right? And showing what's going on there. The very next day, I'm shooting a gas commercial, right? Where we have actors and it's all made up, right? And then the next day after that, I may be, off doing, a kid show or something like that. So it's very different every single day. And so it's really been a whole series of sort of small adventures. And for that, I think I'm most proud. You had mentioned, where did all of this start? And for me, it started in a little town called Delphus, Ohio. little farm town up in the among the bean fields and cornfields, sort of on the western side of the state of Ohio, sort of the northwest corner, and very small town. And I grew up. It was a great town to grow up in, to be honest. Good people, right? They, number one was what the salt of the earth, if you will.
Right.
For me as an artist, I think it was a little bit of a tough place to grow up. And that's because I think that they didn't understand my value, right? Like in other words, as a creative person, it's not a real practical tool for a bunch of farmers, right? So I think that they're in the cornfields of Ohio. I don't know that the community's sense of the value of an artist was very high, and I felt that, and that's really what I'm here to talk to you about is my ability to feel things. And I think that, that started out for me, Karen, as a real negative. And that's because, bullying was a real normal factor where I grew up. And, a very small community like that. And then I was the weird artistic kid, right? I was the kid who sort of had different kinds of thoughts and would build weird things with their Legos versus everybody else. And I think
Yeah.
that, to get when I started, I got told a lot that I was too sensitive. That was sort of what I heard. And
Yeah.
that
It's not.
that
Oh, sorry.
yeah, and yeah, what were you going to say there, Karen?
I was going to say, it's interesting that you say that you were too sensitive because that puts us in the wrong right away, and I'm sure as a child hearing something like that, what did you make it mean as a child? Because the ego is always there to protect us. And we make it mean we're mean making machines, right? Especially as children. So if I may ask, like, what did you make that mean for yourself? And how did that impact your life moving forward, that you were too sensitive?
Yeah, well, and it's an excellent question. And the truth is that I kind of was too sensitive, right? In other words, if I'd gone out into the world with the sensitiveness that I had then, it would have tore me up. I don't know that I would have been able to be a success. And so they weren't entirely wrong. But of course, for me, that meant there was something wrong with me, right? And that was, and it was something that happened a lot, right? I was brought to tears faster than most people. I could feel other people's emotions when someone else was having a really bad day. Like I really felt that, and I don't know the other people around me did. And so, you're exactly right. I felt that there was something wrong with me, and that it was something that I needed to change about myself. And try as I might, I still felt those feelings. I still could sort of, sense all of that, you know. And I think that this was my probably number one, negative, right? You may have heard earlier in our conversation, I had a little bit of a stutter, So when you, and it wasn't even a little bit at the time. As a kid, it was pretty profound. And so I was very much sort of this, stuttering kind of, isolated, um, oddball in the group, right?
Yeah, yeah. I could so relate because I came from a nursing background and I'm an empath. And I came into it thinking I was stupid and I wasn't enough because of the conversations that I grew up with, as a young child. And I just never felt like I was enough. And then, of course, I got thwarted at work all the time when the doctors would say, do this. And I'd question it and like, and I really came to learn that it was probably one of my greatest values being an empath, even though it sucked going through it because I was taking everybody's home with me, and but it was interesting because it set me on my path of creativity. As a creative problem solver today, it gave me ways and means to look at it without making myself wrong. Did you ever get to that epiphany for yourself that there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did, and I did when I was in college, and I began to really shoot more stuff where I was trying to capture an emotion, for example,
Love that.
and then I started to realize, like, my ability to feel people's emotions and what's going on gives me an insight into how to film them, right?
Mhm.
And this gave me a huge leg up. And I could see among my classmates, like a lot of them didn't have that. A couple of them did, But I started to understand that that's the same thing that was always wrong with me, right? The very thing that was always wrong with me now in this moment, I realize is my superpower. This is really what allows me to understand, what's going on around me. And now, and what's interesting is that, for many years as a cinematographer only, I really chased other people's emotions, right? In other words, I would listen and I would feel that, and then off I would go to shoot it. So now as a director, I actually lead those emotions now. And so I really learned how to, the power of our energy with one another,
Mhm.
right? Just our frequency of vibrating
Absolutely.
and how it affects each other,
Yeah. Yeah.
and as a director, I started to learn now how to affect that, how to change that, you know.
Yeah, I love it. I just on the set and I'm in a film called Frequency of Miracle, a frequency, well, they're doing the Frequency of Miracles series, but I'm in Frequency of Manifestation and Frequency of Healing. So you just talked about frequency and energy, never any coincidences, right? So, but from your perspective, because I'm always talking about frequency for vibration, in the healing realm with our words creating our reality. But for you, capturing it on film behind the camera, like what does that look like for you? Ooh, I get the chills. Oh, I know I'm on the, I always know I'm onto something when that was a big one. That was a big hit. So, for our listening audience, like what would that look like for them? Because there's a lot of people out there that are either very much in touch with their emotions, or they grew up in an era where men were taught like, oh, you don't, can't cry, or you're not supposed to feel. And yet the feeling for me is really my GPS and telling me like, so,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is that for you? Like, what do and
Yeah, I
capture.
think that, yeah, yeah, and it really is about trying to be on the same frequency, and what I mean here, actually, let me take you back to when I started to understand this. I had this mentor early in my career named Zoot. His real name was Richard Dwyer, and he lives even to this day in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Amazing, great director and cinematographer, and a DP, and he was one of the main ones that taught me as I was coming up. And I'll never forget this day. We were actually shooting for the March of Dimes, and on the way there, the grip truck blew up. Right, what happened was is literally a fan blade of the fan that flew off and spiked on the underside of the hood. A big dent happened on the hood, and the truck stopped. Right, and so there we were alongside the road, and this meant that in order for us to get to the shoot, someone from our office had to go rent a Ryder truck and come and get our stuff, which meant everything had to be unloaded, reloaded. Then we get to the shoot.
Oh,
So
oh,
obviously now we're a couple hours late. So, we're already behind. And we were in a room full of children playing. It was daycare. And and Zoot had this amazing ability to tell a story. And in those days, we had these little monitors that we would bring along with us, so we could make sure the video image was looking good. And this was my favorite tool as an assistant, I could watch what he was doing, right? So this allowed me to see what he's doing and then see it on the monitor. And so I'm watching the monitor, and it was kind of okay. It wasn't great. It was sort of just getting the job done, I think. I wasn't especially emotion filled. And then I watched him, and he stopped and he put the camera down and he looked out the window for a long moment, and then he picked the camera back up, and the footage, Karen, was totally different. It was emotional. The images that he chose told the story so much nicer, and it had a poetry about it, and it was just really beautiful.
love
And
that.
so on the way home that day, I asked him, like, what happened there, and then he says, well, he goes, my thoughts and my energy was all screwed up. I'm still with our problems that morning with the truck and with what happened. And then here I am in a room full of children playing for daycare. And what I had to do was to get my heart in the right place. So I had to stop and think about what's important here. And if I had a child at daycare here, what is it that I would want to feel? What would I feel? And what I would feel is to, you'd want to know they're safe. You'd want to know that it's a harmonious environment, right? And you would want to know, that there are people there, right there to assist them if they need something, right? And so then I picked my camera up and now my heart is in the right place. And I said, okay, so it was about putting your heart in the right place. And then, and I'll never forget this. He said, he goes, here's how it works, man. If your heart is in the right place, the shots will just show themselves to you.
I love that. Yeah.
And I got to say that it's worked for me for, 30 years, right? Like I've made a career out of that conversation, if you want to know the truth. And because it's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Going into what matters, right? Well, you had mentioned on one of your informational context that you gave me, you had talked about the delights that you receive are really the key to never working a day in your life. I so believe that. I love what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
it's like I don't see myself retiring anytime soon because I love it. And it brings me so much joy and the vibration of having, people like yourself on and not just this, but everything else I'm doing for me is all about serving and lifting others. So for me, I'm not working, at all,
Right.
and being
Right.
a creative. Yeah, we used to have a huge circle out of Buffalo, New York. They actually started a course there, creative problem solving, and it just spiraled off into, so I've been back and forth presenting in South Africa. I was supposed to go this year. It's not going to pan out, sadly, but I've made and met some amazing people in the creativity world. So for me, that's not working, it's playing, and for yourself, it sounds like you are as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's when you first asked me to do this, I was trying to think, is there something I can give the audience, right? Is there some way that I can help? And perhaps this would help. So, when I was trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do, and I was searching for that, in Little Delphus, Ohio, right? And I'm 19 years old. I was a decent salesman, so I just did that for a year to kind of try to figure things out.
Right.
And I think that it's interesting. Sometimes the thing that we should be doing is right there under our nose, right? But it takes someone to give us permission, right? So what had happened was I had a boss, and the boss says, "Look, everybody has to have sales goals." And my boss knew I was struggling to find my way in the world, right? I mean, he knew I wasn't going to be there forever. And he says everybody should have, a salesman should have sales goals. So figure out your sales goals. We already know what your sales, the sales goals would come from him. He goes, but figure out what you're going to reward yourself with. Excuse me. And so if you make your sales goal, what are you going to buy yourself, right? Everybody should have that goal. So take the weekend, think about it, come back, let's talk about it. So Monday morning I come in and I'll never forget this. I sat across the table from him and he says, "Well, what are you going to reward yourself with if you make your sales goal?" And I said, "A video camera." And he
Oh,
said,
so
"A video camera." And I said, "Yeah, I always really loved that in high school and I think I would just really love that." And he looked at me and said, "Well, why don't you go do that?" And I thought, oh my God, that's it. Like it was amazing. Like the thought of
wow.
actually doing that for a living had never really been something I would allow myself to think about, right? Or something that would be on the table. And that was it. Now, of course, what is it that I loved about this, right? So in other words, why this, at this point?
Wow,
And
yeah.
it's interesting because I give talks sometimes to high schoolers about career choice. And I go through all of this math about how long we spend at our jobs and how we really spend longer at our jobs than we do with our spouses even, and how important that this is and how much of our identity is wrapped up in what we do. And so, the importance of choosing this, gets higher and higher and higher, and it
Wow.
can be overwhelming, like the weight that is on this decision about what your career should be. And so now with the hindsight of 2020, I've been able to understand that there's a kernel. There is something about doing something that brings you joy and delight, that is the answer to whether that should be your career or not. So after a lot of thought, I can tell you that the kernel of the thing for me is actually putting a frame around something. Is actually is isolating the rest of the world and saying to the audience, to the viewer, this is important, right? So like, look at this. Okay, now look at this. All right, now look at that, right? And putting that frame around there, and there's so many different things that happen within that frame in terms of the composition and all of that that comes to it. But it's really about selecting that frame. And and I guess, so for me, Karen, it was understanding that that was the thing that was bringing me delight, and that that's the thing that I can do for the rest of my life and be quite happy doing that, right? And I think
Yeah,
that for everybody, that kernel might be something different,
yeah,
in
absolutely.
figuring this out.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so interesting you call it a kernel because I grew up in Massachusetts and we were on the farm with corn farm all the time
Oh
with the
yeah.
cows. My thing was the cows. I would always go towards the animals rather than. But today I have a ton of plants around me, so
Yeah.
there's something about nature that I really speaks to me, and so that kernel. When we plant that seed grows, and in this case, cornfields, but when we plant anything in life that we really love, it grows and it blooms and it blossoms into joy for me. So I'm curious, what is a major accomplishment for you that you've had in your life?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I got to be honest. I've not gotten the big hit of being on a particular TV show or making a show that went really huge, right? Like some people get that,
Yeah.
right? I kind of had my opportunity when Survivor was happening. Mike Murray was the director of photography, and I worked for him at the time, and I got my chance. If I had wanted to go on Survivor, I could have probably done it, right? But at the time, I was being a father, and so I decided to stay home. And so, my big accomplishment, I mean, certainly being a dad. In other words, that's worked out better than I thought it would. I have an awesome daughter, and all of that has worked out, in a wonderful way. Accomplishment, I don't know. I don't really think that way that much. I'm more or less going from adventure to adventure. I think the biggest accomplishment, when I sum it all up, would be that. I think it would be a library of experiences that I've been able to have that I think most people wouldn't get to have. And
Yeah,
that's really what I've accomplished. That's about all I
yeah. Yeah,
got.
I'm sure there's more in there, but that's a great one because it's the culmination of all of that that creates who we are today and what we do and how we serve the world in my world. So, yeah,
Yeah.
you've had a lot of challenges, I'm certain, along the way. We all do, right? Roller coaster of life. So, what challenges did you face and how were you able to overcome them?
Hmm. Excellent question. Um, Challenges that I might have faced. I don't know, I mean, the truth is that, I got to be honest with you, Karen. I hadn't expected that question. Let me just think about that a second. Is there any particular big challenges? I don't know. I think that, I went out on my own in '07, and I left the comfort of a large production company, right, where I got a regular check, and taking that step out the door, of course, was quite sobering. And it feels very cold out there, right? You're on your own as compared to, being with a group that you knew would take care of you. And and in the end, having the courage to just walk through that door and to see what's on the other side, I think, is the is the thing. I've had other failures. I started a company called Joker Box, where I invented a product basically to put for videographers and cinematographers to put their tools in that they could stand on and that sort of thing. It was basically a wooden box you can put stuff in, but a little more elaborate than that. The lids would turn
Right.
into little light stands, but in the end, that didn't work. And to be honest, the best part of that whole thing was the fact that it didn't work. And that's because it freed me of being so afraid of failure, because I realized that had I not gotten that experience, I would never have known. And you got to go know. If you don't go, you don't know, right? So you kind of have to go. And I think
Ex-
that, when you talk to old people who are all laying on their deathbed, the number one thing is what they didn't do, right? The chances they didn't take, no matter how it sort of works out. And so, I think that all of these challenges, as we overcome them, really can free us, from being worried about success so much.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, I just I lost
Yeah.
my train of thought.
That's okay.
There's so many gems here. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So what else have you done in your life does it all pretty much relate to cinematography and directing and such? Or are there other things that you venture off into that bring you joy as well?
Well, certainly I'm a woodworker. I have been my whole life. My father was a woodworker, so I enjoy that. It's great because it's the opposite of what I do for a living, right? Because as a director and a cinematographer, that's a team sport. Like it takes a group in order to do that well.
Yeah.
And in the shop, it's just me alone. So I really enjoy that sort of that back and forth, right? That are between these things. So yeah, it's been wonderful. Do you edit these, Karen, or do you just let them fly from one end to the other?
I just let it fly, go with the flow. How
Okay.
would you prefer? But if you prefer it, we could.
I guess I would just like 1 second because I had another thought earlier and I would just give me 1 second. It might enrich this situation just a little bit. Is
Okay.
that okay? We don't have to stop the recording. Just give me a moment here. Hang on a second.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember what it was. Uh, I guess let's see, I'm not sure how you would edit this in, but I guess what I wanted to go back to for just a second, Karen, is that when we were talking about, the kernel of the thing that brings you joy, right? So for example, my wife loves, being the accountant and numbers and handling all the business aspects in terms of that. I hate that stuff. That stuff gives me, hives just thinking about having to do it. And as I've gotten to know her and question her, I've asked her and I've started to understand that for her, the kernel of the thing that brings her joy is the fact that she can understand what's going on under the hood of a business with these numbers, right? So it's not the numbers as much as the information that she can glean and how it's really kind of the art or the joy of doing sort of a diagnostic dive on a company, right? So I think that you get the sense that what the kernel is it's the thing that you could do, night and day, and not eat, and that's just sort of the thing that you would love to do the most, right? And time sort of slips away. So let me
Mhm.
ask you, for you and what you do, what do you think the kernel is for you?
The for me is I'm really good at what I do, but the behind the scenes stuff, it's not my forte. And that's where I get to delegate because I've learned to let go. It's sort of like let go, let God. That's your thing. Please, please do your thing. And I'm so grateful I've been able to do that. Is really learning to release it has been a huge portion of the kernel for me because as it's growing and formulating and getting bigger and taller, I get to flourish and do me in my authentic truth. And
I
I
see.
think that's been the biggest kernel is really learning to step into that authenticity and allowing it, just like this show is just all about being ourselves. And there's gonna be faux pas, and I'm gonna go, oh, I messed that one up or whatever. Yeah, that's part of life, you
Yeah,
know? So
yeah.
it's really learning, the kernel has been authenticity for me.
I see. I totally get that. Yeah, and it's a joyful place to be. And and
Yeah.
trusting yourself to go through that door, right? To take that step.
Yeah.
That's such a huge thing. And yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. Go
Yeah,
for it.
I just had a thought, because I used to sit there and judge myself and make myself wrong all the time. I come from victim mentality. I mean, that was my growing up. My youth was basically, not enough, not worthy, not smart enough, blah blah blah. And when I learned to that it's not about that at all, and if we're created in the image and likeness of a God or source, or universe, whatever you want to call it, that it's all energy. And why would I be created to look like trash? It didn't make sense to my brain. So I started looking at it differently and I let go of the judgment. And when I started surrendering, and I've had life experiences as well that have taught me that I don't have to be anybody else but me. And you know what? I get to laugh at myself now. So I do stupid things, and it's like, okay, now I can say, oh, there you go again, but I'm not calling myself stupid.
Yeah,
I'm not in a space of like, oh, duh, no, it's no more of that. It's like, okay, I could do stupid things, but I can laugh at myself. And that brings me joy
yeah.
because I'm not sitting here judging other people or having to look a certain way. Life's too short.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
way too
Yeah, so
short.
what you're saying is that they're not a destructive thought anymore, right? They're more of an acknowledgement of what might be true, but they're not necessarily something that's such a negative on you. Yeah, I get that. I totally get that.
Uh,
Yeah, it
Yeah,
takes time and and courage to sort of get there,
it
and
does. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, and I think trusting yourself and just watch, because the very thing that is such a negative in some other way ends up being your greatest quality. Something that's more bankable than anything else you've got. Can also be the very thing that everybody else is telling you is wrong with you. You know, um, so like my sensitivity, I think it was important for me to understand that I probably am too sensitive, and then to and to try to understand that society isn't gonna see that so positively. So I need to learn how to control myself in those situations, and I've gotten much better at that. But don't let that sensitivity be killed, right? Don't let the thing be completely killed, because it can
no,
end up being your very best part, the very best part of you.
exactly. And I had a situation once where, because I too am very sensitive, and I was I am heart-centered. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a nurturer, I'm heart-centered. And I love being heart-centered. And it's finding the harmony between all of it. And I did a facilitation once for I live in Florida, and I did a facilitation once for Jacksonville Sheriff's Department. And I went in there and I was so touched. I asked a question to really get the audience. There were 52 souls in the room,
Mhm.
and the boss who had hired me couldn't get his team to listen to him, and he was like, "What's wrong with me?" And I'm like, "There's nothing wrong with you, right? It's always gets down to communication." And I knew that. So I said to them, like, what's the common thread here? And I spoke to each one of those individuals that were going to be participating. And you have 52 different personalities. Of course, there's going to be some clashing, but I said to them, what's the one thing you do on the side? And there was so many people that played music. And the one word that this, because he gave me this big list of, like, this paragraph that was like, went on and on and on. It was like a dissertation of what he wanted to accomplish. And I said, break it down, break it down, break it down. And when I finally said, get it to one word, energy, right? Get it to one word. What is the energy you want to create here? And he said to me, harmony. And I was like, yes. And then come to find out all these people are playing music to get their stress levels down. I'm like, here we
It's,
go. But I
it's
ended up
amazing.
getting up on stage because as an empath, and I am an empath, that's one of the reasons why I had to leave nursing. But as an empath, I was up there crying when I was reading what they wanted to be acknowledged for. And
Yeah,
they came up to me afterwards and they were like, "You're too sensitive." And I'm like, "There's no such thing as too sensitive, because
yeah,
if I couldn't feel it here, I can't support you there."
yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, it's interesting. Along those lines, in terms of crying at the wrong moment, I shot a show called Birthdays Live, where
Yeah.
literally women gave birth, right, live on television. They had like five of them, and so I'm in one of the rooms. Now my
Wow.
wife was pregnant with my daughter at the time, and so yeah, to be there at that moment, was like, and I got a call back later after the show, and they said, Ben, your shooting was awesome, but yeah, we had to take your sobs out. We could hear you crying on the camera. So it's like, it's like, I'm sorry, I'm an empath. This is how I am. I'm not meant for every gig, but it's been a great path and a great journey, and so I just encourage those people out there, your listeners, to
Mhm.
embrace who they really are, because that we were all made a certain way, and it doesn't, and just because others may want us a little different doesn't mean that we're necessarily wrong. We may have to conform a little. We're all part of a society here. We all have to get along and figure things out in society, but don't let it kill you, right? Don't let it kill that part of you, I guess would be my parting words.
So if that was, is that what I call them pearls of wisdom? Is that
Oh
what
yeah.
the pearls of wisdom that you'd like to leave with the listening audience, or is there another one that you want to sneak in there?
Yeah, I would say if I had a pearl of wisdom, I would say that. if you don't go, you don't know. And you need to go try things because without giving yourself permission to give things a try, you don't really, that's the only way to learn yourself. And so I think it's don't be worried so much about failure. It might happen, it might not. It really isn't, it's almost inconsequential at the end of the day. Whether we had the experience or not is what matters. So if you're out there and you're wondering if you can or not, or if you should, I think everything has a price and you have to figure that in. But I think if you possibly can, you should go for it.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely. I call it failing forward. I get excited to fail forward now. I
Yeah.
used to be so scared. Now
Right?
it's like,
Yeah,
bring
true.
it
Yeah,
on. Oh,
absolutely.
man, it's been such a pleasure. I could talk to you all day, but I know you're
Yeah,
busy.
it has been. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Karen. You create a nice environment to speak in. I love your energy, by the way. I can feel you even through this Zoom call. So I think you're a beautiful person there, Karen, and I think what you're putting in the world is needed. So thank you for allowing me to be on your show, and I hope perhaps I've helped somebody out there. Thank you.
I'm sure you have, because sometimes if we just touch one person, that's
Yeah,
all it's, right?
that's
So
right.
Ben Mesker, thank you so much for sharing your journey and insights with us today. Your story is a beautiful reminder that the transformation begins the moment we become aware, and it continues with those who are brave and badassy enough to step into
Right.
choosing to take it, right? So for our
That's
listening audience, remember the bridge from ordinary to extraordinary is built with small steps of change and big leaps of faith. So you're more powerful than you know. Keep showing up, keep rising, keep an awakening to your potential, because today's episode is really about listening to your inner self, your inner truth. So if you have any questions, want to get in touch with Ben, his information will be in the show notes. And till then, make it an amazing day. Bye for now.